is a great transition, Marco, into our next topic. Speaking of Jimmy, there has been some news in the media this last week about Jimmy. There was a report saying that Seattle was doing their due diligence and may be open to a trade with the 49ers. I know Colin Cowherd on his show talked about how this might make sense for both teams, even saying that, Seattle might even be willing to give like a second because of all the draft capital that they have there, as well as Pete Carroll's age and wanting to be competitive, right away. What do you make of this report? Do you think that there is any smoke to Seattle and 49ers possibly doing a deal with for Jimmy? And if not, what do you really think happens with Jimmy?
So I think it does make sense for both teams, right? In the sense of the Seattle Seahawks, like you said, they have Pete Carroll with an older head coach. They think they can still compete, right? They think his coaching staff and his system is a great system. So they believe they have what it takes to actually win. Now, for the 49ers standpoint, like why does it make sense for the 49ers to move them to a division rival? So everything that I keep thinking of and every time I talk to someone like scout wise and stuff like they're like it makes 100% for the 49ers to move them to Seattle because now what it does is Jimmy Garoppolo forces Seattle to actually win more than 5 to 6 games. It puts them very, very borderline to not making the playoffs. Like it puts them in that range where you're not in the playoffs, but you're also not top 5 pick. So it forces Seattle to actually eventually have to trade up a lot of capital to go get one of the top quarterbacks. There's around 5 quarterbacks that are supposedly going to be going in the first round that a lot of scouts actually really like. So if Seattle's willing to sit there and take the fifth best quarterback in the draft, then it actually makes sense because you try to compete this year, but you still also get one of your guys that you think will eventually be really good in the first round. So you play that game where, all right, let's try to make the playoffs. You keep the fan base happy. You show the fan base that you're actually trying, but you're getting Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's where it doesn't make sense, right? Financially, it does not make sense. Financially, you're better off going and getting someone else when there's no one out there, though. That's the biggest issue for Seattle is they missed on Baker Mayfield. They were actually trying to trade for Baker Mayfield, and now they've kind of pivoted to the 49ers and said, all right, well, you're our last hope for a quarterback. So it does make sense. I don't think Trey Lance is going to, or Jimmy Garoppolo is going to go for a second-round pick. I really don't. And if anyone thinks the 49ers are going to pay any of that salary, they're hilarious because I've seen people say, oh, yeah, well, the 49ers will pay about $10 million of that salary to get a second back. No, absolutely not. Why would the 49ers pay $10 million when they plan on using it in free agency and other parts? Like, if they really wanted to, if the 49ers are a player away, they feel like they're a player away, right, during the season, they could make a big trade and have that $10 million to have that player on the roster. So you have to have that cap. So instead of extending players mid-season and moving cap around mid-season, you have that luxury of being able to trade for someone mid-season. So I don't think the 49ers actually want to pay to move Jimmy. I think someone is willing to actually make a trade or they're going to be willing to cut him.
So I guess like the thought process would be, obviously most teams would rather have Jimmy on a deal that they structured. But if the 49ers do cut Jimmy, I do think that opens up a few teams that might actually go after him, namely maybe a team like Cleveland that might need a quarterback depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson. So maybe Seattle makes that trade just to make sure that they have, Jimmy underneath their umbrella or whatnot. But yeah, I agree with you as far as that the 49ers at this point are more interested in saving the money than maybe necessarily getting draft capital. But I guess the argument that Colin Cowherd made, and I want to see how you think about this, is basically, the 49ers have been pretty adamant that they don't want to lose Jimmy for nothing, right? They still believe he's a good quarterback. Clearly, he's had a lot of success here with the 49ers, especially these last 3 years, taking them to 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. So it would seem kind of counterintuitive to just cut a guy and, really end up with nothing to show for him as far as assets to bring back. So do you believe, I guess that's what Cal Carr is saying, is that he doesn't see a path where they just cut him. Do you see a path where if, let's say, Seattle doesn't offer any draft capital for him, do you see that a path where the 49ers can cut Jimmy and just take the 24 and change into next season.
Yeah, I mean, if let's say Seattle's offering like a fifth or sixth, right? Because people are trying to compare Baker Mayfield's trade to Jimmy Garoppolo when I think they are not comparable, right? Because Baker he was guaranteed $18 million no matter what. So
Right.
no matter if the Browns cut him or if they actually traded him, they were going to end up having to pay him $18 million no matter what, or that team who acquired him was going to have to pay $18 million. Jimmy has the luxury, the 49ers have the luxury of Jimmy being able to cut him, saving $25 million and stuff like that. So what it does for like Seattle having to trade him, they have to offer more than a fifth, because realistically, if you want me to pay for a fifth round pick, I'm not paying for a day 3 pick. But realistically, I'm not going to pay. So
Right.
if you're gonna offer me a second round pick and you want me to pay $10 million, it has to be for a reason. If the 49ers believe like, hey, another second round pick can give us the opportunity to trade up and get one of the best safeties in the draft class next year, then it actually gives you the ammunition and you're paying for a future player. So like you're kind of playing like that Moneyball game in a way that baseball does, where they'll pay for you to get a player and stuff like that. So you're paying for a player down the road. No, I just don't think it's smart to pay for a pick unless it's a second rounder. Third, through anything else, I'd rather save the money and go into free agency with $25 million, looking to spend $25 million on the offensive line, safety, or any other position possible, right? Because at the end of the day, the 49ers have a roster where it's really hard to make this roster. Like if you look at everywhere on the roster, it's how do you beat this person out if you're a young player, right?
Right.
And I think the 49ers would be more suited to go all in free agency or trading up into the first round to get guys like that. So unless it's a second rounder, I don't see the 49ers paying anything, and I think they would rather cut him and save that $25 million. End of the day, what is an organization going to say to other people, right? Oh, of course I don't. I don't want to cut him. Of course I don't. Why?
Right.
Because even if you say, oh, yeah, we plan on cutting him, then if I'm the Seattle, I'll send you a 7, bro. Send him to me for a 7. Like, right?
Right.
Like, you're going to cut him eventually, so I'll just pick him up when he's a free agent. Like, that's and that's what a lot of fans and stuff like that, that's what they don't understand is a lot of times when these talking heads like John Lynch, like whenever they're giving people stuff like, oh, yeah, the 49ers plan on trading him. They don't want to cut him. Of course not. Who the hell wants to cut someone when they could get a pick
Right.
for him eventually? You know what I mean? Like, the possibility of getting a pick rather than just cutting them, it's there.
This is the thing, I guess, Marco, and maybe you could help me understand this. You know what? Carolina gave up like a future fifth, right? And and Cleveland ate a majority of that contract. If Seattle was really in the market to get somebody, don't you think they would have done something like that? Like, I guess I'm not 100% sure if Seattle's really in the market for a quarterback, upgrade at quarterback. Because to me, I get it where you're saying, hey, there may be 5 quarterbacks, maybe they just wait. But for me, at this point, wouldn't you just kind of play with what you have, knowing that you're probably not, even with Jimmy, good enough to make the playoffs? Might as well just kind of play it out with Locke or Gino, whoever ends up winning that quarterback competition, and just play for the highest pick at this point. What's the value? Because I think that I would rather get Baker only having to pay him $5 million versus giving up anything for Jimmy, right? And his big
So
contract.
the reason why Seattle was hesitant on Baker was his character issues. Like, there's very
Okay.
like there's a lot of people that I've talked to. Like, there's 2 scouts from Cleveland Browns and there's a scout from Seattle that I've talked to. Their biggest concern on Baker Mayfield has always been his character issues, even coming out of college, right? Like, he had these issues coming out of college that were overlooked, right? So that was the biggest issue. And then right after he was traded to the Panthers, what ends up coming out that a lot of players in Cleveland were very frustrated with his immaturity issues, right? Like, when you are in Seattle, there's a culture there that they've already built. They built a winning culture with Pete Carroll, right? Like, that's like their culture they have. Like, it's kind of like Pete Carroll's trying to be like Bill Belichick, like, oh, it's my
Right.
way or the highway kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for him, he would rather roll with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who's very loved in the locker room, no matter who it is. They love Jimmy, and it's Jimmy's just a good guy. So why not roll with a guy who has more character than a guy who's going to be immature? And you put him with Drew Lock. Oh, Jesus Christ! I would pay to see that. I would pay to see that.
There would be some nice rap battles in that locker room for sure.
I'm pretty sure Drew Lock and Baker Mayfield are probably fist fight, and I would actually pay to see like them in a locker room together competing because like those two dudes, they're both immature. Like you could see it.
Maybe they'd make Hard Knocks, right? Um,